the last edition of the program for the week. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwa. We'll begin with our update on the global oil market as prices eased slightly this morning as markets wait to see whether major producers will commit to an extension of record production cuts to support oil prices. Brent crude futures were down 8 cents at $39.91 a barrel, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 15 cents to $17.26 a barrel. Still, both benchmarks are set for a 6-weekly gain on the back of output cuts and signs of improving fuel demand as countries begin to ease restrictions to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. WTI is up nearly 5%, while Brent has risen about 13%. OPEC Plus is expected to meet on Saturday to discuss extending output cuts. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies, led by Russia, a grouping known as OPEC Plus, had been expected to meet on June 4 to discuss extending output cuts, but the meeting was delayed amid talks over poor compliance by some producers. Saudi Arabia and Russia, two of the world's biggest oil producers, want to extend output cuts of 9.7 million barrels per day into July. If OPEC Plus fails to agree to roll over the current output curbs, that would mean the curbs could scale back to a cut of 7.7 million barrels per day from July through December, as earlier agreed. In the meantime, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries says it expects the global economy to shrink by 3.4% this year due to the impact of the novel coronavirus. This was made known yesterday by OPEC Secretary General Mr. Mohamed Bakindo via teleconference at the 7th edition of the technical meeting of OPEC and non-OPEC countries participating in the Declaration of Cooperation. Pointing to the May edition of OPEC's economic report, Mr. Bakindo says he expects world oil demand growth in 2020 to drop by a staggering 9.07 million barrels per day to around 90.59 million barrels per day, a level last seen before the 2014 to 2016 market downturn, with a worse impact expected within this quarter. And in the meantime, Nigeria is one the world's largest producers of crude oil and relies mainly on crude oil export for its foreign exchange earnings. With the volatility in the oil market, experts say it is pertinent for Nigeria to begin to rethink on how to make most of its petroleum resources. Well, joining me now to give us a better understanding of some of the developments in the upstream sector of the oil and gas is the Chief Operating Officer, Ventures and Business Development of the NNPC, Mr. Roland Ewubari. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the show, Mr. Ewubari.
Thank you very much, Obi. Glad to be with you.
Sure. Let me first get your take on the development in the global oil market with OPEC and its allies delaying talks to extend output cut over poor compliance by some producers. And what's this report about Nigeria not complying with the output cut, even though the Minister of State for Petroleum had mentioned that Nigeria has met its production cut? What will these mean for Nigeria's production output target?
Thank you very much, Obi. Excellent question to begin our conversation. So the minister is correct in terms of what he's put out to the world about our current compliance status. And I believe the GM of NNPC also reiterated that point on a call with Bloomberg yesterday. There's some confusion in the market around the production parameters and what exactly goes into the cuts. We at full capacity do about 2.3 million barrels a day, all right, fully loaded. We're currently doing about 1.7 million barrels. OPEC cuts ascribed to us as a result of the last decisions taken was supposed to about 1.4, all right? Now, you and I know that condensates are not included in the numeration and counting of the cut numbers. So 1.4 pure oil we certainly have met. The little you see over above 1.4 does not count as part of the basis for assessing our OPEC quota. So the minister and the GM are both on the money. They're correct. We are in compliance. The numbers come in on a rolling basis, and as we present all the full present the full spectrum of information to the market and to OPEC. This misguided nuance about Nigeria not being in compliance will be dispelled. That's my belief.
Okay, now we have seen the volatility in oil prices, and for Nigeria to maximize the situation to its advantage, there is need for the cost of production to come down. Now, the GMD of the NNPC has always talked about the need to reduce the cost of production. Can you tell us why the cost of production is high in the first place?
Thank you, Obi. So our business is a very simple one, really. All right. We extract the resource from the ground, we sell it, or we put it in storage. It's that simple. Right. Now, because of the different terrains and environments within which we operate in Nigeria, there are peculiarities that are unique to different terrains. I said on a different platform yesterday that very few countries in the world where citizens of the state vandalize and destroy assets that belong to the state and exist for their common benefit. All right. So when we talk about costs, there are different elements that go into those costs. We start with the simple one, which is staff costs, for example. I can tell you that the fully loaded costs of personnel in the Nigerian oil and gas basin is probably one of the highest in the world. All right. But we operate in a country where there's high unemployment, so we're not inclined to go around laying off people to reduce costs, because that just increases unemployment and creates knock-on problems for the economy. But there are some certain aspects of our cost profile that we believe we can address aggressively. A good chunk of our costs come from logistics, security, and transportation charges for the crude to the export terminals. All right, those are the costs that we are relentlessly attacking and trying to drive down, so that we get to a point where our unit operating cost per barrel is sub $10. Today, if I were to move a crew, all right, from an NNPC operation, say NPDC or one of our IOC partner operations, Shell or Chevron, move a crew to the Niger Delta to do work, I have to get soldiers to escort them while they're on land. I need Navy patrol boats to stay with them if they are going to be operating in the swamps and creeks. And if it's deep offshore, I even need more naval boats. All of those things cost plenty of money. All right, and those are costs that many other jurisdictions don't have to deal with. These are costs that are unique to our environment. So those variable drivers, ma'am, we are cognizant of, and like I said earlier, we're working relentlessly to bring down those costs. And we believe that by Q4 of next year, ma'am, we'll be able to deliver you oil at sub $10 a barrel.
Okay. Now, the contracting cycle in Nigeria has also been fingered as one of the reasons for high costs of crude oil production. How do you intend to correct this anomaly?
So that issue was a ripe issue a few years ago. I don't believe it's a real relevant one anymore, and I'll tell you why. We recognized about 4 or 5 years ago that the contracting cycle made no sense. You start a tender process for goods or services, and it will take you 3 or 4 years to conclude. You certainly can't operate that way. It's not efficient and doesn't make any commercial sense. So we then, came up with different ideas to contract to sort of contract the contracting cycle. And I was in charge of that process for 2 years. I ran NAPIMS, which manages our joint venture relations, for 2 years, and that was the one item on my agenda that I focused on, with pinpoint precision. And I can tell you very, very confidently that before I left NAPIMS, we ran some very major tenders, start to finish, in less than 6 months. So that narrative about contracting cycle is an ancient script. It's not relevant in today's NNPC. We were able to start and finish our transactions within a time frame that makes sense.
Okay. Now, before now, oil-producing countries are not so many, but today, many African countries are discovering and, of course, producing oil. So there's a lot of competition. And here in Nigeria, there has been a slowdown in investments, particularly in the upstream sector. How do we begin to attract those international oil capital into the country?
Superb question you just asked, Toby. The truth of the matter is, I always tell people that the technology and capital you need to do significant investments significant development in the oil and gas space does not exist in Africa, doesn't exist in Nigeria, certainly. All right, it has to come from the rest of the globe. Those are the guys who have the money and the technology to help us unlock the resources that we've been endowed with as a country. A couple of years ago, you're right. In Africa, for example, you had oil in Nigeria, in Libya, Angola, where else? Not that many basins. But today, there's oil in Somalia, Sudan, Ghana, Mozambique. Everywhere has oil. So we are now locked in mortal combat, all right, for the global investment dollars around the oil and gas space. The only way we can attract investments, ma'am, is for us to remain competitive. We've got to put a fiscal regime on the table that enables global investors to bring in their capital, all right? That capital has to be protected. Capital has to be safe. We've got to have institutions around dispute resolution, good courts, good off-court type system, so that if there's any, issue, you can resolve very quickly. You need to have a fiscal regime in place that enables them derive a benefit for every dollar invested, and that benefit that they derive has to be over and above what they will get in a comparable basin elsewhere in Africa or outside of Africa. Now, the problem we've had with attracting investments is that we haven't put a properly structured, comprehensive piece of legislation in place to address the multiplicity of issues that confront us in this environment. All right, there's agitation in the Niger Delta. So, what's your solution to host community problems? All right, you've got to write it. It's gone beyond a lip service. You have to write a law now to talk about how you carry those communities along as you extract resources from their domains. You have to have legislation written that explains to the guy bringing in his global capital that while drilling for oil, if he finds gas, all right, X% is his share of the gas take. You have to put in legislation that describes how this industry will be regulated. Are you going to, is DPR as currently set up? Is it fit for purpose? Do you need a National Petroleum Commission or not? NNPC, are there some things you should be doing? Are there some other things you shouldn't be doing? All of that in a comprehensive legislation needs to be in place. Now, we announced to the world maybe 20 years ago that we're going to do a PIB. We haven't done it. And until we do it, people don't like uncertainty. Investors don't invest where there's uncertainty. So as soon as we resolve the petroleum legislation, I believe we'll attract more global capital to our space.
Now, in your estimation, could you quantify what Nigeria may have lost due to non-passage of the PIB?
That's a tough one. I don't know what exactly we could have lost, but I'll just tell you what the world has been like. So I joined NNPC from the US in 2015, a little over 4 years ago. Now, in that time frame, there's been just under $80 billion of final investment decisions taken in oil and gas in Africa. All right, just about 80 billion. Now, the totality of that amount, only 2% of that came to Nigeria. The rest of it went elsewhere. The only major deal that we've been able to close is the NLNG Train 7, which is a pretty big transaction. It's pretty significant. But other than Train 7, if you track back to say end of 2019, nothing major has come into Nigeria in the last couple of years. And again, it's because there's still way too much uncertainty in the investment environment.
All right, now, what exactly is the story behind the $2.8 billion AKK pipeline? Now, some critics argue the pipeline is only strategic to the economy of the North.
I think that's an uncharitable statement to make. Last I checked, Nigeria is a federation comprised of 36 states. I don't like getting into conversations around, it's beneficial to the north, east, southwest, because, that's just my own personal position. My father was a general in the Nigerian army. I lived all over Nigeria. I see myself, inside out as a green, white, green child. So Nigeria is Nigeria as far as I'm concerned. The AKK pipeline is a super significant piece of national infrastructure that is long overdue. That line is supposed to take gas from the fields of the Niger Delta through a 600-kilometer line from that's going to run from Ajaokuta through Kaduna into Kano. All right, and along that line, the initial plan is to have 3 gas-fired power plants. Total capacity, I think, 3,600 megawatts. Now think of what 3,600 megawatts would do if you inject that into the national grid today, and this Siemens electrification plan goes according to plan. If you're able to distribute that into the national grid, that's significant power added. You're probably going to double what you have today into the economy. So that benefits everybody. 2, we know for a fact, it's not anecdotal evidence, it's proven that development and prosperity goes with gas infrastructure. So to get to Ajaokuta, you're going to develop infrastructure in the Niger Delta anyway. And then the infrastructure itself from Ajaokuta into Kano. It means you're talking about a line of prosperity beginning in the gas fields in the Niger Delta through the Middle Belt up to the north. That has to be something that every Nigerian ought to support. In any event, we're not funding it with any direct, or that much direct cash. We have a small equity contribution to make. The rest of it is funded on a project finance basis, which means the project itself is supposed to generate the income to repay the loan. All right? So bankers who are bringing their money to the table have clearly done their feasibility, have done their bankability report, and their conclusion has to be that the project is viable. If not, they won't be putting money on the table.
All right.
So it's a very good piece of national infrastructure that deserves the support of every Nigerian.
Okay, so a quick one before I let you go. How exactly will the investment be protected and recouped given the spate of vandalism across our pipelines?
Excellent question. Remember what I said at the beginning, that we remain probably one of the very few environments in the world. I think it's us, Bolivia, and maybe Colombia, where citizens actually actively destroy national infrastructure. So vandalism has been a major problem in Nigeria across crude lines and across the product lines that move white products across the country. Now, the current infrastructure you have was put in place many years ago, 70s, 80s, all right? And those lines run on the surface. So if you go to some neighborhoods, even here in Lagos, you see pipelines and people have encroached right of way. They build their homes and churches and mosques around their pipelines and all that. And that's what's led to the ease of vandalism, because you just, walk across, puncture a pipeline and siphon products. What we're doing with AKK and other pipeline projects we're working on in NNPC now is to use the benefit of technology and do what we call HDD, so it's horizontal direct drilling. We bury the pipes deep into the ground, all right? So there's nowhere any vandal in Kaduna, Kano, my village of Ovo, anywhere, can access those pipelines anymore. So the problem of vandalization would disappear once and for all once we go HDD, and that's what we're working on. It's very expensive, but it's the only way to go.
All right, let's just hope that happens. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Roland Ewubare. Mr. Ewubare is the Chief Operating Officer, Ventures and Business Development of the NNPC. And after the break, still on the oil market, we'll talk about it more, this time backed up with data. Just stay with us. And the Nigerian lawmakers voted for a $28 per barrel as the new benchmark for oil price. Now, this also comes with a lower forecast on oil volumes, but how much will this decline affect Nigeria oil revenue? Babajide Ogunso, Channels TV data analyst, will give us more insight on that. Babajide, my first question is, who is buying Nigerian oil?
There are several ways we could look at this. We could look at it from which continent is buying Nigeria's oil or which countries are buying Nigeria's oil. But I'd like us to first of all look at it from the continental perspective. Which continent is buying most of Nigeria's oil last year, 2019, because that is the data we have. And from that evidence, we can see that the first continent that's buying most of Nigeria's oil is Europe, followed by Asia. Between Europe and Asia in 2019, we sold over 10 trillion naira worth of oil to these two continents. But again, perhaps what is even more important is to understand which of these countries buys most of this oil. And from the evidence we have, India, Spain, France, Netherlands are the top 4 countries that bought most of Nigeria's oil in 2019. In other words, approximately 50%, approximately half of all Nigeria's oil in 2019 was bought by India, Spain, France, and the Netherlands. The reason why that is important is because of what we've seen this year, the coronavirus. These 4 countries, as at today, has reported over 700,000 cases of coronavirus, and their economies are expected to decline, which means that, or the implications is that we're not going to really see a lot of demand, a lot of crude oil demand from India, from Spain, from France, and from Netherlands. So that's some source of worries. But what is the State Oil Corporation doing? And by the State Oil Corporation, we're talking about the NNPC. What exactly are they doing to minimize this? It's interesting that the NNPC says, apart from them looking at the internal concerns of the coronavirus in Nigeria, they've also started doing various scenario modeling. Well, that is what their top leaders say. They started doing various scenario modeling on the implications of lower crude oil demand from India and from Europe. So what we'll expect is if the NNPC is able to continue with that, with their plan. We've heard the CEO some minutes ago talk about improving the margins as well on crude oil. If we're able to improve the margins to as much as 10, to lower the operating cost of crude oil, then we'll also be able to see much progress in the days ahead.
So how do we attract more capital investment into the oil and gas sector? Because that's an important thing. Important question a lot of people are asking now, particularly this time around that oil prices are going down. And of course, there are a lot of competition about people or countries that are producing oil.
So what we've seen in the last 5 years is there are a lot of other countries in Africa, especially among the 54 African countries, that have shown oil reserves. And what this means is that investors are no longer just looking at Nigeria as an option. They are considering their returns on investment, yes, from their dollars across other countries. So let's look at how much capital has come into Nigeria since 2015. Between 2015 and 2019, Nigeria has seen $68 billion worth of capital into the country within 5 years. However, the oil and gas sector has received only $1.44 billion out of the $68 billion that's come into the country in the last 5 years. A lot of the money goes into shares banking, financing, servicing, production, and telecommunications. So oil is number 7 on the rank of sectors that are attracting capital in Nigeria. So how does the NNPC want to do that? The NNPC says apart from crude oil, what their leaders are talking about is improving revenues and improving the margins from gas. So we've seen a project like the NLNG Trans 7 that is expected to come on board within under 2 to 3 years. That was expected to improve Nigeria's gas revenue and also diversify our oil base. So right now, we're seeing a lot of revenues coming from the sales of crude oil, but there's a lot of potential which the State Oil Corporation wants to now start exploiting from the gas sector.
Okay, so how attractive is Nigeria oil and gas sector to investors?
So that's the look. We've seen that at the moment, it's not the most attractive sector. There are legislative problems, there are operating problems, there are security challenges which all stakeholders need to focus on. This is not the time we need to go into the politics of distraction at the State Oil Corporation. We've seen that what we need now is to balance our projections and to look at how we increase more prosperity to Nigerians from the oil we earn. Let's look at how much we've earned from oil in the last 5 years. So what we've seen is in 2015, oil gave the Federation $3.8 trillion naira. That's how much we earned. But what we've seen in the last 2 years, we've seen some stability. Some stability because we've seen crude oil volumes stable at about 1.9 to 2.1 million barrels. As of last year, the CBN reports that oil accounted for 5.5 trillion naira. And in 2018, oil also accounted for 5.5 trillion naira. So that's a lot of good news. We've seen the State Oil Corporation role in trying to stabilize revenue and make it easy for the National Assembly members to also make their forecast. We've seen that the National Assembly members are also considering a $28 per barrel. So in the last 2 years, prior to COVID-19, we've seen good news from Nigeria's oil revenue in terms of stability. What we now need going forward is to minimize the effect of the coronavirus and also explore the other opportunities we can earn from crude oil. Let's not forget that the government also needs to focus on non-oil revenue to now ensure that we're able to cross the 20 trillion naira revenue to the Federation account as soon as possible. What we have is, as our 2019 total revenue to the Federation account was approximately 10 trillion naira. Oil accounted for more than half, but we need to ensure that more money goes into the Federation account, and that those monies can only come from two sources, oil and non-oil.
All right, Babajide, let's just hope we eventually get it right in this sector. Thank you very much.
This is not the time for us to be distracted by what is going on. The State Oil Corporation and all stakeholders need to keep their focus on how we ensure that there's stability in Nigeria's revenue growth.
Let's just hope so. All right, thank you very much. Babajide Ogusowo is a Channels TV data analyst. Okay, just before moving now, let's still revisit the global oil market space as prices is slightly this morning as market wait to see whether major producers will commit to an extension of record production cuts to support oil prices. Brent crude futures were down 8 cents at $39.91 a barrel, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 15 cents to $37.26 a barrel. Still, both benchmarks are set for a 6-weekly gain on the back of output cuts and signs of improving fuel demand as countries begin to ease restrictions to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. WTI is up nearly 5%, while Brent has risen about 13%. OPEC Plus is expected to meet on Saturday to discuss extending output cuts. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies, led by Russia, a grouping known as OPEC Plus, had been expected to meet on June 4 to discuss extending output cuts, but the meeting was delayed amid talks over poor compliance by some producers. And as the world continues to be rattled with the coronavirus outbreak, with key economies and sectors taking the hit, one sector badly affected by this is the hospitality sector. Mr. Samuel Alabi, President, Hotel Owners and Managers Association, and the Chairman, Tourism and Hospitality Group of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joins me now to tell us more about the sector's response to the outbreak. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So, how severe is the impact of this pandemic on your sector?
Well, unlike many other sectors, like banking, manufacturing, construction, retail business, that were allowed to operate with some sort of guidelines under the even lockdown regime, hotel and other businesses were closed totally. So, be that as it may, I will say without any fear of contradiction that our losses were total. It was zero revenue and zero business.
So are you able to quantify the amount of money perhaps you may have lost in your business?
Yeah, in terms of Naira and Kobo, that may not be easy for me to mention on behalf of all members of our association, but the losses were colossal, very huge.
So what is the job situation like? How has jobs in that sector been affected?
Yeah. Majority of our employees had to be put on on leave, on forced leave, where we maintain skeletal staff for safety purposes, that is security, also to ensure maintenance of machineries and equipment that may not be shut down in perpetuity. So they have to stay around, ensure that those facilities have been maintained. While the bulk of our staff, the operational staff, were asked to go home. Since no customer, no business, and hence there's no need for them.
Well, now that the lockdown kind of is being eased, some of the hotels are being asked to open, gradually. So what's the situation?
That pronouncement for us to open came like 3 or 4 days ago. So our members are still at the verge of reopening, because I'm sure you must have heard the policy of Lagos State that asked our members to fill certain data online before they commence business. And most of us are just resuming back to business, just, if not today, maybe tomorrow, because of the long lockdown policy that was just lifted a few days back.
Now, is there any consideration for palliative for this industry?
Yes, I am aware that the federal government, under the Federal Ministry of Culture and Information, as well as the Lagos State Ministry of Tourism, we set up independent committees that ask our members to submit a memorandum as to the extent and scope of their losses. As at date, we are not aware of the quantum of palliative that will be given, but it is essential that our members are afforded palliative because of a lot of complexity and complications that will arise if such interventions were not done for us.
All right, but you are aware of some of the intervention funds announced by the central bank. We have the 50 billion at least for the small and medium businesses, which I believe most of your members should be able to benefit.
I have been correcting the people that fund is not meant for us. That fund is essentially for SME and some other sectors.
Okay, your business does not fall into the SME?
No. We are talking of investment running to billions. I don't want to be mentioning hotels here. So it cannot be a place we give them 5 million, 10 million or 50 million for them to be able to recover their losses.
Now, has the association made any requests for the palliative?
Yes, this is what I said, that our committees to Lagos State, we submitted a memorandum in accordance with the request of Ministry of Tourism.
And what exactly are they demanding?
What they ask us is to tell them what our areas of losses. Number one, we told them our members suffered total loss of revenue. Number two, some of the existing financial facilities could not be serviced by our members during the lockdown period. Number three, we have paid some charges, rates to government in January, in February. Those charges and rates, we're asking that they should be postponed till next year. If it has not been paid, we're asking that those charges and levies should be postponed till the following year. We're also asking for cessation of some taxes during the 3-month period and a lot of other things.
And what responses are you getting?
The committee are still working. The committee of both levels. The federal government set up committee, the Lagos State Ministry of Tourism committee, they are still deliberating. We are waiting the outcome of government.
Well, we know that the COVID-19, of course, affected quite a lot of things. Yes, the hotels are not working, and that is because people were not traveling.
Yes.
Now, the government has announced that very soon the flights will resume, domestic flights will resume. Are you excited about this?
Yes. It has a direct positive impact on our business, because as it is now, even when we open our business for customers, it will only be limited to intercity customers. If you cannot travel from a town to the other, the need for you to stay over will not arise. But with the lifting of the ban on domestic airline as from 21st of June, we trust that businesses will start to come in. And if eventually the international route is also free, it will be better for us.
So what's happening to your various suppliers at this time?
That is another head of our claim. In February and even in early March, many of our members, of course, accepted deliveries from our suppliers, unknown that in a few weeks' time, the hotel will be locked down. Most of these items were perishable. They are now bad in our store, so we have to start again to stock our store back, incur expenses, and a lot of things. Those customers, those suppliers, will not listen to us that the items supplied by them could not be used for business. So we have to pay for items that we are unable to use during the lockdown. And I'm sure they also bear a brunt because there was no regular supply from them to us during the period of lockdown.
Okay, now before this COVID-19, of course, I'm sure this industry, or this sector must have been going through some kind of challenges. Can you share some of the challenges of this sector?
The number one issue we have is about power supply. Power supply is very important in the hospitality business. If you have 100 rooms hotel and you only have like 10% occupied, if there's no power supply from the public means, it means you have to put your generator on. In Nigeria, generator that are supposed to serve as backup to the main supply has now become the main supply, while the power supply from the mains remain the backup to the generator. Is an absurdity. And then the situation in Nigeria, the traffic hold up, especially in Lagos. If somebody wants to take his family for a weekend treat in a restaurant and spend like 2-3 hours on the road in the traffic, such family members may decide to turn back midway, or even if they manage to get there, that they may not be able to, they may not want to come back again. And you also talk about even funding of the business. Unlike the creative arts, that they have intervention funds created during the era of Goodluck, President Goodluck. The hospitality sector and tourism as a whole has no such fund where our members can get interest as a single-digit interest rate. Mm-hmm. So we have to compete with other business with high volume of turnover at the commercial bank, and it is not helping at all.
All right, so what lessons would you say your members have learned or are learning from this pandemic in terms of perhaps that would reshape the way they do business?
You see, it came to us like a thunderbolt.
Yeah, to everybody.
Nobody prepared for it.
Absolutely.
But what we have done, in line with the world-based business practices, in South Africa, the Federated Hospitality Association, or in America, the American Hotel and Lodging Association, came up with like a protocol. But now the members who run their business take into consideration the coronavirus factors, telling them how the distance to maintain and a lot of things. Our association also came up with a protocol to assist our members to make our business safer for customers, guests, and lawful visitors that may find their ways into the business. Because hotel business is about confidence. Once customers lose confidence in their safety in any one or two hotels, that might distract others from going to any other hospitality outfit.
So what is the outlook like for this industry post-COVID going forward, having learned these lessons, the need for safety and all of that?
Well, it's going to be, I would like to say that it's going to be replanning. We talk about conference centers, event halls, restaurants, the way we operate in Nigeria, where you want to celebrate your wedding or your birthday, where everywhere will be jam-packed, can no longer be so. People will have to learn how to stick to the number of IV issued so as to ensure that overcrowding did not occur, and then unplanned infections will not arise.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Alabi. Samuel Alabi is the President, Hotel Owners and Managers Association, and of course the Chairman, Tourism and Hospitality Group of LCCI. We'll do an opening call to London as well as look at the developments in the local markets after the break. Do stay with us. We'll start this segment from the street of London with Juliana Olainka. Good morning, Juliana. Well, German chemicals company BASF has emerged as the biggest beneficiary of the Bank of England's emergency coronavirus loan scheme, borrowing about £1 billion in cheap government-backed funding. What is the discussion around this, considering the issue of carbon emissions, and why foreign company in the first place?
Good morning, Chimese. Well, there hasn't been any discussion about it yet. The information was released yesterday by the Bank of England. In fact, this is the first time that we're actually finding out who has been receiving this money. As you said, BASF is a German-based chemicals supplier. It is actually the biggest chemical supplier in the world. And I do know that they, of course, operate out of Britain, but it will certainly raise eyebrows because for weeks upon weeks, there were several small to medium-sized enterprises that were really struggling to get the banks to loan them any money, which is why the Chancellor had to do a mini scheme, which would give lots of these small companies money pretty instantly. Back, as you said, they received £1 billion, which is the lion's share of the funding. Other names there included Chanel, the luxury designer brand, but they've released this statement. So I suppose over the next couple of days, we're likely to see whether or not this will grab any more headlines.
We'll keep a track on that. And British Airways refused to join industry call with Home Secretary Priti Patel over proposals for 14-day quarantine. Why?
Why? Because they're not happy. Willie Walsh, the chief executive officer, the outgoing chief exec of IAG, the parent company of BA, has been given a round of interviews this morning. And again, they're really not happy with the government's decision, which starts on Monday. So anybody coming into this country will have to face a mandatory 14-day quarantine. And there were some people that were expecting the government to do a U-turn this week because there have been so many concerns about just how crippling this will be for the already pretty damaged hospitality and tourism sector here in the UK. But Priti Patel did not back down, and she spoke from the dispatch box earlier this week at the House of Commons, and they said it's important to continue with the progress from the country trying to battle the coronavirus pandemic. Ryanair attended the call, representatives from Virgin Atlantic as well as Jet2 Holidays were there, but BA declined because they feel there's no consultation needed with the government unless they decide to scrap it.
And what should we expect today as the week wraps up?
Well, the FTSE opened higher today. It's been a stop-and-start type of week, and it was the airline stocks that were the top of the rally. EasyJet, even though that's now been demoted to the FTSE 250, the domestic market, that was up by 9.8%. Also, BA, IAG, they were up by about 4% this morning. I suppose because it's Friday, it's become the ritual. All traders will be keeping their eye on the US jobs data, which is expected in a couple of hours. It's been increasing every single week, and there are some suggestions that today's result could show that the world's biggest economy will have an unemployment the biggest since the Great Depression in the 1930s. So very worrying because, of course, the US is the largest economy in the world.
All right, Juliana, see you later for more updates. And for Thursday's market review, here is Temple Ashaju. Well, Temple, the Bears got a hold of the market yesterday.
That's because they had so much of profit taken in the market yesterday, and that's translated to some 50 billion naira decline in the all-share index. In the equity capitalization of the market, we went back from 13.24 trillion naira yesterday to 13.20 billion naira, but we're still around the 16 trillion naira mark in terms of what the market is doing. Let's look at the volume of transaction was down by 24% yesterday. This was down, that's the value was down by some 26%, I beg your pardon, yesterday. Volume of FBN holdings continue to contribute massively to what we're seeing, and that's basically, albeit without gains yesterday. It was flat. Actually, some 41 million units of the shares were traded. If you look at the sectoral performance, banking stocks were down. That's as a result of profit taking. FBN is around 5 naira, that's something kobo. Access Bank has actually been on as well, and quite a number of all these banks have been were down yesterday. Now, consumer goods side of the markets, we saw We saw a 0.89% gain yesterday. Industrial goods, thanks to Dangote Cement, which was positive yesterday. And if you look at the insurance space, that was also negative by 0.28%. Now let's look at the oil and gas stocks. Adava PLC was unchanged. Conway was unchanged. 11 PLC was also unchanged. O&O was negative yesterday. That's due to some profit taking. A negative of 3.57% after some 1.9 million units of the shares were traded yesterday in the market. And of course, if we look at other aspects of the market, not so much gains. We know that Japol was positive again yesterday. It moved now, it's been moving consecutively. That's typical of Japol actually in the market. Capital Oil, RAC Unity, no movement. If you look at the NASD OTC, was up yesterday 1.35%, 510 billion naira in terms of market cap. And if you look at the volume of transaction, 89,847, value of transaction 4.67 million units, thanks to Niger Delta Exploration Production Company and of course CSC. As we have Jamiu Muhammad, head securities dealing at APT Securities and Funds, joining us via phone. Jamiu, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you. Good morning. Tempo Asadi.
Great. So quite a lot of profits taken in the markets yesterday. That's reflective of the market sentiments. We saw gainers at 16 and, of course, losers at 17. So should we say the time is up for profits taken in the market and we should be looking at some kind of gains or profit around the new price levels we're seeing at this point?
Yes, there's always oscillation in the market, movement of the prices in the market. So what we have been experiencing over a period of time is we are having gains every day. So yesterday we have a loss, and we expect to have a loss today too because of what has happened. So the profit making cannot continue endlessly. So if we have profit taking yesterday, we may likely have profit taking today too. And going into the next week, we'll be having we'll return to our positive territory, the market.
So how much opportunities do investors that are buying for dividends, how much of opportunity do they have now going forward, knowing that quite a number of the companies are done paying their dividends to investors?
As far as we are concerned, last year dividend being declared by those companies are not disappointing. So anybody investing for long term in respect of dividend, they should, I think, is a good decision. I always advise them to go into the long-term investment so that they can be able to take advantage of those companies that have been declared in good dividend over a period of time. If you look at dividends over time, is always encouraging, and we advise our investors to always go into dividend-paying stocks so that anything they invest in, they have return on their investment.
Jamiu Mohammed, thank you so much for your insights. Jamiu Mohammed is head of securities dealing at APT Securities and Fund. Let's move on with the other aspects of the market, and that will be the debt and currency side of things, where FGM bonds yesterday, we saw interest around the 2030 to 2035 securities. There was really active trading day for a lot of investors there in spite of the OMO auctions that took place yesterday. Look at the NCB side of things. It was only the 13th of May 2021 security that's at the longer end of the curve that continues to enjoy some retail interest actually in the market, because that's where you have a bit of higher rates. Look at open market operations. This was also quite active yesterday between the September to October to November papers. We saw some interest, and of course mainly around the January 21st 5th of January 2021 paper, we saw quite a number of interest there. But we have Ifema Onyejekwe, fixed income trader with UBA, joining us via phone now. Ifema, it's good to have you on the program. Talk us briefly through the OMO auction of yesterday. We understand that there was decline in the stop rates. Was that true?
Yes. Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so in line with the CBN stance of maintaining low stop rates in the system, stop rates declined on all tenors offered. It declined on the short tenor offered to 4.95 from 7%, that's about 205 basis points. On the medium tenor offered to 7.79% from 8.75%, about 96 basis points. And on the long tenor bill to 8.99% from 9.90%, that's about 91 basis points. 70 billion was offered and sold, while there was double subscription on the short and medium tenor bills and over 5 times subscription on the long tenor bill.
Now, Ifeoma, there's also the bi-weekly FX retail auction that the CBN carries out with local banks like yours. And of course, we understand that there was a CRR debit late last night. If you square this up together, how are you pricing that in for your dealings and purchase today across the debt markets?
Well, like you said, the CRR debit of about 405.72 billion, in addition to the CBN swaps and the FX retail, we don't expect many bids today at the FX retail auction since market participants would be lacking in sufficient liquidity. So we don't expect a lot of demand, and also the supply of foreign currency has been poor. Looking at the previous retail FX bids, so we expect demand and supply on both sides to be poor at today's auction.
And that means that there will be a lot of buying on Monday when the market reopens after this week ends today. Ifeoma Onyejekwe, fixed income trader with UBA, United Bank for Africa, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate them. Chimeze, it's back to you.
Thank you, Temple. Well, we can only hope for the best. I continue to say that. And it's on that note that we draw the curtain on today's edition of the program and, of course, for the week. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago.